Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let us begin the second session of the afternoon, the final session of the day. It's a variety of papers on Failaka, including the waterfront and Al-Qusur and the new Italian excavations at Khorania. Should be a very interesting session. The first speaker is Julie Boneric. Oh, Julie, do you mind waiting 1 minute while I make an announcement from the Dar al-Athar? Just 1 second. So I've just been asked to mention that, as many of you know, the objects excavated on Failaka and on the mainland from the pre-Hellenistic period onwards, including the Nestorian cross, the famous Nestorian cross, they're currently on display at the Dar al-Athar Americani Cultural Center, which is just down the road from here past the Parliament, along the Arabian Gulf Street. Now there's also an exhibition of objects from Mesopotamia to Bactria, and from the 4th millennium to 700 AD. That's a fantastic, I haven't managed to see it myself yet, I'm going to go and see it tomorrow. But I've heard, all of our team went, that it's a fantastic exhibition. So it's open tomorrow from 10 o'clock until 7 in the evening, and everybody here is cordially invited to visit. So that's an opportunity not to miss while you're here in Kuwait, for those of you that aren't always here. Right, Julie, thank you very much. Please, let's start.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I want to thank, of course, the NCCAL and in particular Shehab Ali Shehab and Sultan Douish for this invitation. And I want to thank the crew for the organization. And please, I apologize for my English, and but it's not my fault because I'm just French, so that's it. Although Failaka Island is very famous for its bronze and Hellenistic sites, the island is also home to an important Christian archaeological site, one that is essential for understanding the history of Christianity in the Gulf. In the early Islamic period, two churches were surrounded by a large settlement. Aligned on an east-west axis, no, it's not for me. These two churches differ in size, layout, and construction. Buildings surround the churches, most with the same layout. An enclosure included a domestic structure with few rooms and one or some annex, such as a kitchen and storage room, separate from the main unit. These domestic structures vary in size and are more or less spaced from each other. Other buildings with one or more rooms are unenclosed. The study of Al-Qusur must be integrated into larger questions, especially concerning Christianity in the Gulf. Some texts from the 5th century, in particular Syriac ones, like Chronic of Sert or Chronic of Arbela, mention monasteries and bishops in the Gulf, testifying to the existence of Christian communities in the region. The last text, referring to Christian community, evokes a synod organized in 676 to resolve disagreements about the religious authority of Bet Ketroye region. So it's the region where our site is situated. Contrary to textual sources, archaeological sources concerning Christian settlements in this period are relatively poor. Two hypotheses could explain this gap. Either these early sites have yet to be discovered, or religious buildings, Christian communities markers, were not identified by archaeologists because worship took place in private houses. The mention of a late Christian presence in the Gulf are quite rare and scattered. For some researchers, the lack of texts signifies the absence of an actual presence. The Syriac and Arab literature make reference to an early Christian occupation without mentioning a Christian community in the Gulf after the end of the 7th century. This is the reason why Christian sites discovered in the Gulf were dated from the 5th and the 6th century. However, archaeologists actually date these sites to later periods, from the 7th to the 9th century, as our ceramological study of El-Qusur has confirmed for this site. The site of El-Qusur is of prime importance for studying monasticism in early Islam. Although it is not the only evidence of the Christian presence in the Gulf, this site is nonetheless crucial to understanding the chronology of Christian settlements, the liturgy of the Church of the East, and way of life of these communities. It offers a wealth of information about the history of Christianity of the Gulf, in the Gulf, but also about the beginnings of Islam in this region. Despite the fact that El-Qusur was excavated over many field seasons led by various teams, Italian, French, Slovakian, and Polish, in collaboration with Kuwaiti archaeologists, three crucial questions were still unclear and needed to be clarified when the French Kuwaiti archaeological mission was set up in 2011 under the supervision of the National Council for Culture, Arts and Letters and the French Institute for Near East. That is to say, chronology, nature, and organization of the settlement. Let's start with the chronology. While the Italian expedition led in 75-76 by the University of Venice had proposed a chronology for El-Qusur of around the middle of the 7th and the 9th, 10th centuries, the expedition of the Fouilles Françaises de Failaka, FFF, estimated that the site was founded in the beginning of the 5th century. Noting this deficiency, I conducted in 2011 a study of the ceramic discovered by the FFF expedition, so the previous French mission, from 2007 to 2009, as well as research on the mission archives of 88 and 89. The comparisons I undertook with other sites in Gulf, Iraq and Iran provide valuable dating indications. Diagnostic shards indicate an occupation during the 7th and the 9th centuries, most likely the 8th and 9th centuries. Some of these shards include fragments of eggshell pitcher with gouge lines, shared with pointed circles with incised lines and gouge motif, stamped decoration, interlaced motifs, undulated incisions under blue glaze, and careened cups with blue glaze. So it's just some example of diagnostic shards. The presence of a Sasanian coin, discovered in 2011, could be a problem for this dating. However, this coin seems to be an Arabian Sasanian coin, probably from the end of the 7th century. The coin displays images of the emperor, a fire and altar, and priests. Since coins are used over a long period of time, this coin could have been in use in the 8th century, I said before. Moreover, this coin was discovered on the surface out of stratigraphic context and is difficult to use in dating the settlement. Let's have a look at the organization of the settlement. 2011 also saw the creation of a general map of remains on the surface, completed by the observation of aerial photographs and guide photographs, as ordered by the Department of Antiquities and Museums and planned by the mission. This map, which is being created by Jean Humbert, is very precise due to the field observation, which is crucial. Aerial views are indeed much more approximate than lacking for some points. It has very precise graphic codes to distinguish the different layers of interpretation, Colors and symbols differentiate walls on the ground, restored walls, walls seen on aerial photographs, collapsed wall, collapsed structure, etc. The center of the site is actually the only part drawn, but this map is intended to be cover the whole site. So I don't know if you see something. So this is what we call the French enclosure, so the center of the settlement. And as you can see, there is only some enclosed building around, so it's less dense. So I will change the map. This map is an extraordinary support for archaeological interpretation because we can obtain, without systematic excavation, a well-documented view of the site in its entirety, even if only the surface appears, of course. While the map is yet unfinished, interesting information already appears. The site is clearly organized around a center characterized by its density of remains, as you can almost see here, and by its higher importance. The buildings situated around the center are mostly enclosed and are less dense. So I will change because you can see nothing. The remains on the surface reveal an homogeneous organization. On the one hand, there is a very common type of enclosed building with a central unit and one or few annex units. On the other hand, the buildings of the settlement are similarly orientated. In the middle, various organizations appear. In the northern part, for example, the buildings are placed side by side on an east-west axis. In the southeast part, on the contrary, the buildings are together with one common wall. In the southwest, the buildings are close but not aligned and without common walls. Generally speaking, and although it is not an urbanization, it is clear that the settlement, rational and organized, did not develop irrationally. So now the nature of the site. The mapping program, which began in 2011, allows the choice of relevant areas for excavations responding to the research questions regarding the nature of the site. When the mission began excavations in 2012, the aim was also to understand if El-Qusur was a village and or a monastery. To respond to this question, we started two excavation areas, one to the north of the churches, A5, and another to the west, A4, on the outline of a large empty space, here, as you can see, which could indicate the limits of a monastery. I wanted to clarify the presence or the absence of a wall enclosing the monastery around the churches, similar to other monasteries in Gulf and Iraq. Various elements point out similarities. First of all, the West Church's plan is very close to monastic churches of Sir Bani Yas, Kharg on the Iranian coast, and Ain Sha'aya in southern Iraq. On these sites, a wall closes monastic space. A wall oriented north-south and placed beside the apse of the Eastern Church, excavated by FFF in 2009, could be the same kind of wall as expected by Jean-François Salle. So this is this wall. Otherwise, the area surrounding the churches is empty of construction, as I say here. Sorry. In the monastic sites I just mentioned, an empty space separates the church and the monk cells. On the surface of El-Qusur, buildings are aligned to the north and west of the churches and are separated from them by an empty space. The aim of the excavations in areas A4 and A5 was and still is to understand the nature of the site. To the west of the churches, two types of installations were discovered which cannot be monk cells. In the north of the area, quadrangular buildings are built like enclosed buildings, typical of the settlement with earth elevation and a stone base, an internal floor probably in plaster, similar orientation, etc. However, this building, which is particularly large, seems non-enclosed. It was not yet extensively excavated, but its layout partially appears. In the northern part, 3 rooms are aligned, opening onto a courtyard, following another layout than the enclosed domestic unit. In front of the church, the stratigraphic connection between the two buildings need to be studied here. In the south of sector A4, a building was discovered that was almost entirely in large module rose stones. This is totally exceptional on the site where mud brick takes precedence. The building is partially semicircular. The walls are recovered by an enormous collapse of large module stones, and this is why the form of the building is still unclear. It takes time to remove the collapse. The construction of the building is quite unusual in العصور. A building all in stone, or almost, with large walls, 80 centimeters, it's quite large for العصور, and large module stones. The 2013 field season brought out, under this building, a north-south orientated wall and a domed plaster soil. The building in mud brick on a stone basis is probably quadrangular and aligned with the global orientation of the site. The other walls of the building could have been re-employed for the construction of the large stone building which is on this wall. At present, it is hard to chronologically situate the relation of these buildings with others in the excavated sector. But it is clear that we have here at least 2 phases, and even more because we have a reoccupation of this big building in stones, but I have no time to speak about it. The excavation of area A5, supervised by Marion Rivoal, is concentrated to the north of churches. The aim was still to identify the presence of monk cells. The large empty space appearing on the surface, closed by a wall in the northern part of churches, was not the vestige of a monastery's enclosure, or the exterior limits of cells, as in Kharg, but the limit of enclosed houses side by side. However, under this layer was discovered other walls, making the history of the site more complex. In the later phase of occupation, the one on the surface, what you can see here, few buildings are aligned side by side with some passages, as you can see here. Under this habitation phase, with stone base, appears another phase of construction, probably all in mud bricks, with orthogonal layouts. It seems it is not longer an enclosed building, but buildings with few rooms and an orthogonal enclosed open area. Floors and walls are plastered. For this phase of occupation of the mud bricks buildings, we do not know yet the circulation spaces, and we do not have yet a full layout of one building. Lastly, one excavation trench was undertaken between the West Church and the mud bricks walls in order to understand the connection between them. That is to say, here. It seems an empty space was arranged between the church and northern buildings, but smaller than expected with the remains on the surface. So the empty space is not as big, it's smaller. It's from here to here, almost. The three last campaigns of the French Kuwaiti archaeological mission have considerably expanded our knowledge of El-Qusur. First of all, the dating of most of the center of the settlement to the early Islamic period is now sure, contradicting the hypothesis of previous French expeditions. However, we still need to clarify the chronology of each phase of occupation discovered, as well as the chronology for the construction of the churches, and not only of the occupation. Moreover, the setting up of the global and precise map of the site offers the opportunity of a better understanding of the whole settlement, its organization, and its evolution. At last, the excavations has highlighted some phases of occupation and complicated the history of the settlement. El-Qusur did not have a short and homogeneous occupation, as we can think. It remains to be answered if the older buildings are monk cells pre-existing the phase of the enclosed buildings, or if they are the remains of ancient and non-monastic occupation. The question is too, are the buildings to the west of the bigger church prestige buildings for a village or collective monastic buildings? The initial question of whether El-Qusur is a village and or a monastery remains. So, the form of the West Church, the empty space around the churches, the east wall, the orthogonal rooms discovered in 2013, all these elements could indicate that the settlement was a monastery. The small enclosed buildings situated around the center could be domestic units for older monks. However, what about the large houses, like the one excavated by a Slovakian team, as we saw, with more than 6 rooms? Could these be houses for a few monks, for example, an older one with disciples? Another interesting fact is that there is not one but 2 churches, which is exceptional for the Gulf sites. Archaeologically, nothing shows that one is previous to the other one. Was one church for pilgrimage and festivals, and the other for usual uses? The 2014 field season must help, inshallah, to answer some of these questions, mainly regarding the monk cells. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you for sticking to time as well. I know there'll be lots of questions for Julie, so if we can keep those until the end of the session. And now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Magdalena Nowakowska, who is going to speak to us about waterfront archaeology in Failaka Island. Thank you.
The project Waterfront and Underwater Archaeology of the Coastal Zone around the Failaka Island was initiated in the spring of 2013. Kuwaiti Polish Archaeological Mission operates under the agreement between the Center of Mediterranean Archaeology of Warsaw University and the Kuwait National Council for Culture, Arts and Letters. Waterfront Archaeology team is a part of Kuwaiti Polish Failaka Archaeological Mission headed by Dr. Agnieszka Pienkowska. Both the climate change as well as the economic and social development can have a negative impact on the archaeological heritage along the coast of Failaka Island. Archaeological sites and artifacts could be buried or revealed due to environmental changes, either naturally or as a result of human activity. Nowadays, it is possible that various ancient remains, harbors, and other coastal constructions at Failaka could become submerged. However, some sites are accessible at present sea level and therefore should be recorded and studied before becoming ruined or completely disappearing. Types. Oh, sorry. Types of ancient structures built along the coastal include the harbors, construction of seafood farms like fishing traps, shipyards, submerged parts of cities, anchorages. The submerged structures, including underwater shipwrecks, are vulnerable to water changes. The sea activity could cause a quick erosion effect, resulting in collapsing or even the complete destruction of the archaeological evidence along the seashore. In coastal areas, intense human activity can have a significant impact on important heritage sites. Summing up, the detection of archaeological sites along the coast could provide the possibility of documentation, protection, and finally monitoring the traces of the past human activity in the whole area. Having the knowledge about the archaeological resources of area along the coast, researchers could help to rescue most of the ancient remains. The aim of our project of waterfront and underwater archaeology is to detect and describe remaining archaeological sites at the seashore, as well as to provide documentary evidence and finally organize the proper preservation so that the discoveries could serve further educational opportunities. The program of waterfront archaeology research for 2013 assumed the inventory of stone structures in Caraïbes El-Dasht Bay. The first step was tracing the groups of stones around the small bay to verify possible clusters and distinguish natural form from intentional arranged construction. The aim of it was to recognize and document groups of stone objects which were interpreted as an installation for fishing farms, so-called fish traps. Tidal process is essential for waterfront archaeological research in the Gulf. The amplitude in Kuwait's bay is about 2 meters, but tides can vary from 3.5 up to nearly 4 meters, depending predominantly on the lunar phase. For survey and documentation of the littoral structures, low water level and the daily lights is required. During our activities in Caraïbes El-Dasht, we were completely dependent on the tidal cycle. Performing measurement and photographic documentation of stone structures was possible only for a few hours a day. High water often made any kind of scientific activity impossible. For our work, we used the calendar of tides provided by the Maritime Office in Kuwait City. During the Caraïbes El-Dasht Bay survey, 12 stone constructions were registered. They can be divided in 3 groups: big linear stone constructions, small circle constructions, it's the group of stone circle constructions, one is here, and linear stone construction different from the first group, object number 12, it's a small one. 11 constructions are situated not more than 400 meters from the coastline, and one of them is about 800 meters from the seashore, object number 9. Our task for this year was to prepare an inventory of archaeological sites in the Bay Caraïbes El-Dasht on Failaka Island. The activities included mainly documenting a plan of the bay with certain marked objects, contour plan of selected part of the bay, initial reconstruction of the bay shoreline, photo documentation, photogrammetric documentation of selected object, drawings of selected archaeological sites, 3D models of selected archaeological sites, and computer animation of tides process. To implement the plan of the bay and bathymetric map, it was necessary to prepare the geodetic grid for the whole area. The survey measurement data depend on total station. We made 2 kinds of total station measurement, for architectonic documentation and for geological strata measurement. Map and plans were made in the Universal Transverse Mercator, UTM, Geographic Coordinate System. For all selected objects, geodetic documentation was conducted using total station. It was also necessary to complete the survey with photogrammetric documentation, 3D documentation, and 3D animation of tidal process. It was conducted on selected stone construction in the bay. The first group of stone constructions are the linear object. 3 big linear stone constructions were localized. It was construction number 1, 10, and 11, and one smaller object number 12. 2 of them, number 1 and 11, were qualified as well preserved, and number 10 as destroyed, probably to a large extent. The construction of object 12 was different from the others, and I will return to it later. Due to considerable dimensions of the construction, full analysis will be possible after completing the documentation, as the aerial photos are utterly crucial. Object number 1, the biggest one, it's 2 slides of this object, it's the first and second, is situated in the western part of Bay, in front of Karaib al-Dasht settlement, which is explored by the team of Dr. Agnieszka Pienkowska. The building stones are arranged in the form of walls, reaching up to the height of about 60 to 70 centimeters. The longest wall is composed of several sections, about 200 meters long, in the northeast direction. It is composed of several sections arranged more or less thoroughly. In some places, gaps between them exceed to 2 meters. Construction lie over the length of about 200 meters, goes smoothly for about 90 degrees in the other arm, construction beginning on a small stone arch. This arch is here. The arch is forming a cove coming out of the north beyond the main line of the structures. The length of this branch is about 150 meters. The wall in a section with corner, and the cove is constructed very carefully with collected stones. The north part of this object is serving as a breakwater in a natural way, separating the area of the pool from the sea. Third part of this construction, third branch, is going smoothly for about 90 degrees of the southwest. Its length is about 30 meters. It is ended similarly to regular stone clusters. Object number 10 has linear construction too. It has one short arm, about 10 meters length, made of collecting stones. It goes about 90 degrees up to the long line of stones, about 120 meters, divided for 3 sections of stone clusters. This construction seems to be strongly destroyed. It is possible that stones from it were used for the construction of the object number 11, which is situated in the nearby of the east side. Object number 11, the last of this group, is so-called fish trap, which is being used up to this time by fishermen from the farm situated in the coastal zone preceding this construction. The shape of this trap's outline is more or less rectangular, similar to the construction number 1. Whole construction is made very carefully with big collected stones. Some of the stones could have been taken from the object number 10 and 12, located on the western and eastern side of the object 11. Nowadays, it's difficult to clearly interpret their function. This kind of linear construction is recognized as a fish trap, and the analysis of the construction of linear objects will be possible after making archaeological documentation of them. Local fishermen use linear construction up till now. At the high tide, the water is going in, and they are throwing nets onto the construction. During low tides, they are collecting fish. The second group of construction are circular objects. One of the most interesting findings are 2 groups of circular stone objects. The first of them includes 5 objects. It's the first group of objects on this plan. It was registered at the relatively small area close to the shoreline, about 100 meters into the sea. Object 2 is situated partly, on the beach and covered by sand. Only a part of the structure is visible. Next group, 2 objects, number 7 and 8, with similar construction, were registered more than 200 meters to the northeast from the group of 5. The last one, object number 9, discovered far from the others, about 800 meters to the north from the shoreline. Objects 3, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are located exactly in one northeast axis, if we see it's the one axis, Other structures are only a few meters away from them. All these objects were built with the stones of different sizes arranged next to each other, forming a regular circular constructions. There are two gaps in the circumference is every single construction, or the small part of the ring is significantly lower there. These gaps, or lower parts, acts as the entrance for the free flow of the water. Entrances of the majority of structures were situated in the northeast and southwest orientation. The diameter of circular constructions ranges from the 4.5 to 7.5 meters. This type of stone objects were probably made by cutting hole in the bedrock and surrounding it by stones. The further circle construction, object number 9, is constructed with stones arranged in a circle with a diameter of about 14 meters. Depth inside this object was measured, proving to be more than 1.5 meters. This object is very difficult for documentation because it's practically on the border of tides. The time of exposition of the stone construction is very short. Around the construction, the ground is muddy. There was simply no possibility to make a photogrammetrical documentation this season. The methods of documentation. Because it was our first season of survey and there was no possibility of making aerial photos by kite or autocopter, we were forced to invent and construct a special kind of pole which was used for the vertical photos. Vertical pictures and geodetic measurements were a basis for the preparation of CAD documentation and photogrammetry of selected objects. It is basis for the three-dimensional photo scanning. The series of photos of several groups of stone objects were made from a height of about 5 meters, follow on one small circular object. About 60 vertical images were needed to obtain photomosaic pictures and finally a photogrammetric plan. The photogrammetric documentation was made only for a small circle stone construction and for the linear object number 12. This technology of bamboo pole is not sufficient to perform this type of documentation for big objects. Larger constructions require photos from higher level. The documentation of linear objects 1, 10, and 11 and for construction number 9 will be made next season with the help of the kite photography. Vertical photo documentation is possible only during low water when objects are uncovered and a large part of them is dry. Taking vertical photo obviously depends on lights and in the case also on the degree of dry seabed and stone constructions. Water, which is on the bed and between stones, glitters and works like a mirror. The windy weather affects in the sea waving. These details often makes it impossible to sharpen the pictures properly. The autofocus is impossible. 3D models of selected objects were based on the vertical photos. Full 3D models consist of triangular mesh and raster texture. Documentation involved geometrical and photogrammetrical invitation. Perspective and axonometrical views, photogrammetrical projection, and animation. And in this presentation, there will be there is no animation because it was too heavy for presentation, but it's working like this. Section and contour plans. 3D models of shoreline construction also give possibilities of sea level simulation. Full documentation basis on geodetic measurements made by total station. The attempts of evaluating the thickness of these objects indicates the depth. And it's a traditional documentation. The attempts of evaluating the thickness of the object indicates the depth of circa 1.5 meters. The exploration of one of the small circular rings would be essential in the following season. It could help to answer for some questions. What kind of deposit or distract is inside? How deep is this object? How it is working during tides? What is the function of this kind of objects? The water level simulation and the observation carried out during high tides seem to indicate that the localization on, maybe I go back to this slides, seem to indicate that the localization of the construction is not accidental, as they are situated in main streams of the tide flow. Objects located closest to the shore tend to work longer, practically always. Object number 9 is revealed rarely, only when the water is lowest, circa 3 centimeters. The realization of the full bathymetrical control plan for the bay would be helpful for further studies of these construction functions. And the last object for which we made an inventory is the object number 12. It is localized in eastern part of the bay, here in the east side, and it has a completely different construction than those described above. It consists of 3 sections forming solid stone constructions. The first part C, is heavily damaged, preserved only in outline. It's made of small stones arranged in a line with a width of about 2 meters. The central part is built of stone blocks forming a regular wall with a height of about 1 meter and a width of more than 2 meters. In this part, the construction is very solid. The construction required the adequate preparation of the blocks of stones. The third part of is destroyed from the eastern side, but not as strongly as the first from the western side. The face of the wall was partly formed by vertical stone slabs and stones collected between them. Total width of the foundation and the fact that the stone blocks were specially prepared indicates that it was a strong and durable construction. Along the entire length of the wall, between the stones and surrounding structures, numerous fragments of pottery were recorded. Pieces of clay pots can be derived from the neighboring settlement of Al-Quraniya and could get there in the process of erosion of the site. The second possibility is that the fragments of pottery were used deliberately as a bedding layer to the strengthened structure basis. This problem can be solved only by performing excavation survey on the object next season. The total length of the construction is about 60 meters. The first part is about 14.5 meters. Central section is about 23.5 meters length, and the third one 21 meters length. The whole structure forms a smooth curve. The interpretation of the function of this construction is different from the others, which is registered in the bay. The solid construction suggests it might have served as a port for the Al-Quraniya settlement. The strong wall was both a pier and a breakwater. Similar constructions are well known from the harbor photos of historic Kuwait City. But first, I would like to show you the simulation of sea level on this object. And the historical photo of the harbors of Kuwait City. Conclusion. The architectonic construction of object 12 is very interesting. It was possibly used as a harbor, pier, and breakwater. Now we haven't got the evidence for establishing the chronology of the stone construction. The exploration of object 12 by making small trenches close to the stone construction could be the solution for many research topics such as what kind of the solution you have, what was real size of the construction, what is the chronology of this construction. We hope that continuation of research in Karaib el-Dasht will be allowed to answer for this question. And in the end, I would like to introduce my team. It's Kuba Kaniszewski, Jakub Kaniszewski, archaeologist, and Szymon Lenarczyk, and me. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Magdalena. It's very interesting to see such work. The first work going on in Kuwait, I think, isn't it? It's the first work, underwater work like this in Kuwait, right? So it's very nice. Excellent. So again, questions to Magdalena we'll have at the end of the session. And now, I'd like to introduce the final speaker of the day, Dr. Andrea Di Micheli from the Italian Archaeological Mission working at Corania in Failaka.
Good evening. First of all, me and Professor Gianluca Grassigli want to thank the National Council for Culture, Arts and Letters for this invitation and for the possibility to carry out our project in Corania site on Failaka Island. In 2010, the Kuwaiti National Council for Culture, Art and Letters and Professor Gianluca Grassigli of the Perugia University signed an agreement to carry out archaeological fieldworks in the site of Corania on Failaka Island under the supervision of a Kuwaiti-Italian team. The archaeological site is a desert village located along the north shore in the western central part of the island. Although the area has been known since the 18th century, the first survey was performed only in the 1976 by a research team of the Venice University. Further surveys were carried out by the Slovak team between 2006 and 2009, using electromagnetic prospection, which made it possible to draw a map of the archaeological evidences of the area without performing any physical test on the ground. Thank you for the map, it's very useful. During the first years of research, the Italian team was conducted an intensive survey covering the entire area of the site, which allowed us to recover a large quantity of materials, mainly consisting of pottery. Such preliminary findings were used to create a map showing concentration level of pottery artifacts and to give a preliminary chronology to the site that is possible to date between the 18th and 20th and early 20th century AD. Thanks to this survey, we could also identify and map some buildings, as well as several stone heaps, which are likely to be the remains of collapsed buildings. The purpose of this preliminary activity was also to understand the real extension of the village and to identify, where is possible, any trace of planned urbanization. The first result clearly showed a higher concentration of houses in the northwest area, which goes from the flat zone on the west side to the shoreline, while the density of structures seemed to decrease together with the quantity of pottery as we moved away towards east. In addition to the building structures that in totally occupy almost 400 meters east to west, we identify also two big dumps with burned middens, pottery fragments, bones and shell, which were placed respectively on the northwest and southeast side of the hill. These limits seem to sign also the two borders of the settlement. They are a clear sign of a long period of human occupation. The 4 years of excavation spent to investigate different areas located both inside and outside the village, selected both for materials and structure visible from the surface, allowed to fix some data about the architecture and the chronology of the site. First of all, it's now clear that the area of Al-Qurainia was occupied in the two well-distinguished historical periods by two different settlements. The position of those does not appear to overlap. An early Islamic occupation was clearly identified on the west side of the village, where structure related to almost two houses and a productive area are characterized. Where structure were highlighted related to almost two houses and a productive area characterized by kiln and ovens. This is the kiln and is the other structure. The materials collected until this is some shards of pottery that come from the outside settlement. The materials collected inside the village also suggest that the following occupation of this area occurred after the abandonment of early Islamic settlement, came quite late, probably after the middle of 18th century, early 19th century, according to the presence of Kunji wares and Chinese porcelain with red enameled decoration. It involved at first the top of the hill, where the geophysical prospection and the sounding revealed the presence of early phases of occupation. As regards the latest phases of life, Al-Quraniya, corresponding with the structure visible on the surface, the trenches opened in 3 different places of the settlement allow to establish the archaeological sequence that seems to indicate an intensive occupation, starting in the end of 19th century and running through the first decades of 20th century. Significant buildings, parts of 3 entire houses were excavated in extension, reaching in 2 cases the earliest phases of occupation. 2 of these are traditional courtyard houses with a large open area surrounded by some rectangular rooms, while the 3rd one seems to be quite different in plan and more complex in architectural development. The first house is a fenced building with a length of 25 meters for each side, divided internally in different spaces. The structure has 2 open-air courtyards, this and this. One bigger that occupies a large area in front of the structure, this one, and one smaller, probably an inner courtyard, located between the house's rooms. Both the fenced area were open along the south side in relation with 2 big entrances. The other side of the structure was occupied by 3 rectangular rooms, and thus it was possible to reconstruct the archaeological sequence until the first phase of occupation. We were able to identify in one of them almost 4 levels of flooring. One of those were made up with mud bricks. All the rooms seem to be occupied intensely by 1 or more family groups, as the presence of 12 ovens placed both inside and outside the room would testify. One of the most important results, due to the absence of dating potteries from almost all the inner archaeological level, is the precise date of one of the first floors of the house. According with some fragments of porcelain bowl found inside room 2, it was possible to fix the chronology to the first decades of 20th century. The second house was placed on the top of the central part of the site, where the hill start to slope down toward the sea. Since the first year of excavation, it was clear that this structure was completely different from the others, both for the planimetry and for the building technique. The house seemed to be composed by the conjunction of different houses. This operation was effected during a long time, in which the structure, starting from a more complex planimetry, was subjected to some refashioning that interested both the dimension of the rooms and the inner partition. While the main use of these first 2 houses seems to be residential, with space used only for domestic activities, the excavation of the 3rd house revealed a more complex architectural sequence and a clear partition between a residential and a productive area. The structure is a courtyard house facing to south, structured around a big open square space in which was possible to enter through a large gate opening on a beaten earth roof here. The excavation involved the whole surface of the house, but if in the southeast part it was decided to remove only the topsoil and define only the upper part of the mud brick walls in order to preserve them, the northwest part of the structure was investigated in depth. The southeast part of the structure is a long room set on an east-west axis. The west side was characterized by the square-shaped hall delimited by mud brick walls with a door frame to east that lead into a room. Here some collapses of piers and some architectonical fragments allowed to reconstruct part of the upper level of the inner facade of the walls, decorated with at least one blind arch for each side, placed between angular piers. This is the part of the collapses of two arches. Several scraps of molded plaster seems to indicate also the presence of a refined internal decoration. The northwest side of the house, instead, was completely excavated, with some sounding those highlighted the complete archaeological sequence. It consists in two long halls placed along the north and west sides of the courtyard. The first one had walls built up with sandstones and was divided in 4 rooms, 2 larger than the other, by 3 walls. 2 of those was made up with mud bricks. The 2 bigger rooms were entered through 2 entrances identified along the south wall. The second one, divided from the other one by a thin passage, here, was completely built with mud bricks with the niches facing on the courtyard. Here. The different orientation of the structure, not perfectly perpendicular to the other one, and the absence of a structural connection between them, allowed to assume that it was added in a second time. The last side of the house, finally, was occupied by another long room highlighted only in its north part. The excavation carried on inside the 2 halls, those occupy the north and the west side of the courtyard house, showed a complex sequence of archaeological levels, starting from the mud collapse of the upper part of walls that filled all structure, to the different overlapping layers highlighted in the different rooms. What distinguished these 2 buildings from the other found during the excavation was the presence in both halls of area dedicated to the dead processing and their storage. 3 madbassa, 2 in the north room and 1 in the other, were found in connection with the oldest level of occupation reached inside the structures. The date presses were made of sandstone and mud bricks, bonded and plastered with lime mortar that formed channels with round profile. Only one of them, preserved in a little part, seemed to have linear channel, while the other 2 have irregular one. This is what that remain of the beginning of the madbassa. One of these, placed in the north room of the west hall, still preserved the pit for the collecting jar. The reconstruction of the archaeological sequence revealed that at a certain point 2 of the 3 madbassa were abandoned and intentionally covered. More precisely, in the west wall, the level of the pavement was increased on the wall surface of about 50 centimeters, using fragments of mud bricks thrown together, while in the other one, the channels were completely removed. The only one madbassa remaining in use seems to be the one located in the north hall, placed between the 2 mud bricks wall plastered with a thin layer of lime. The 2 halls were later paved with a new lime floors, and a mud brick wall was built up in the northwest side of the west hall to create a new little room. In this same structure, in connection with this last level of occupation, there were recovered a large quantity of pearl oyster spread on the floor and 3 entire green glazed jars. This phase represents for sure the last level of occupation of the house, as testified by collapse of mud structure that closed the context. As regards the chronology of the house, the rather small and plain assemblage of materials makes it difficult to pin a precise date of the historical sequences of the edifice. Concerning the last phases of occupation, a single sherd of porcelain dated in the late 19th century and coming from the leveling deposit inside the west wall allowed to assume a terminus antequem and postquem respectively for the level with the mud bassa and for the floor of the last phases of occupation. This data, together with the materials collected during the survey in the same area, fix the chronology of the building between the 19th and the early 20th century. Thanks to the data collected during the excavation of the site, and in particular of the house with the mud bassa, it seemed to be possible to outline some aspects relative to the urbanism of the village in the last phases of occupation and the economic and some economics aspects and social features as well. The remains uncovered in the village indicate at the moment a development and the building activity between the 19th and 20th century. During this period, houses were refashioned in many times. Apart from house 1 that is isolated from the center of the village, the house with mud bassa and the other ones identified around thanks to the aerial photos taken by Dr. Hamed Al-Mutairi seems to have the same orientation and to be organized in planned grid of street and alley. This is one street that divides two different houses. This is one perpendicular street. This is one of the wall that closed one of this route between the house. This is the actual situation, and this is what we think that is the organization of the quarter. The remains suggest that all structures were typical courtier houses, indicating the presence of a high-status domestic building, a prosperity based on a diversified economy. While the high presence of fish bones, anchors, weight for fish nets, and the less quantity of sheep bones highlight a subsistence economy tied to fishing and breeding, but also to the cultivation of cereals according to the number of millstone fragments recovered, the presence of mud bassa and pearl oysters suggests also more specialized production connected probably with trade. The house with the mud bassa becomes therefore a mirror in which is possible to see a suggestion of the evolution of the economy of Failaka through the age. The house typology, divided between a productive area with storehouse and residential spaces with fine ornamental elements, seems to suggest the presence of a merchant class who was able to diversify its own business. According to the materials, the period of productive transformation of the house coincides with the end of 19th century, moment in which it's possible to fix the peak of the pearling industry in the Gulf. Thank you. Only I want to show you some materials that we have found the last day of excavation in the early Islamic settlement. This is a big jar that we identify in the section of one of the house. Is
honeycomb, no? Honeycomb.
Yes.
Nice.
Is completely entire.
Wow.
And this is for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and that's excellent and very brief as well. That's what we like at coming to the end of the day. So we've got 10 minutes left before the end of the day. We've got time for some questions. Yes, please.
I'd like to thank you very much for these lectures, which we listen now. And I have one question to Dr. Magdalena regarding the sea, because I agree with you that the structures in the coast, the walls is built for break the waves to not come the strong waves to the seashore, because there is also in Bahrain, in the north coast of Manama, there was a lot before they reclaimed the sea from the sea when they reclaimed the land. So it was a lot of them in Bahrain, in the north part of Manama. It is to break the wall, the waves. But the round structures, this is, do you agree with me, that is fish traps? Because there was also in Bahrain, they used the date palm branches to make them an arrowhead shape. And when it become low tide, they make pit in the middle of this structure, and they can collect the fish fresh when it become low tide. When it become high tide, the fish comes near the coast. When it become low tide, the fish is going and they will stay in the fish traps. And maybe this circle walls, maybe it is fish traps, isn't it?
At first, I agree that it could be a fish traps. It's a simple solution, but we haven't got evidence for it. And in our observing, we know that not only fish, but there's so many, for example, crabs around this construction. We haven't got. We are sure that we are sure that the linear object, the long linear object, which are well known from the Gulf, is the construction for fish trap. But I would like to check how works the circle construction, because at first I agree. I think that it could be fish traps, but maybe what kind of fish? It's working all the time, or only temporary, only for special kind of fish. We don't know. It's in very shallow water in the seashore. That's. I hope that we will check it next season.
Mark, a question? Just here. Probably been bribing him.
Yeah, thank you. They were all the papers were really interesting. Just continuing on the fish traps, two things. One of the things is I published a photograph of a circular stone structure that's very similar in size like yours on Dalma Island on the west coast of Dalma. It's in the first international UAE archaeology conference volume. And it's the same. I noticed your opening is on the shoreward side, so again it's used for catching fish. The second thing is that the breakwaters, I'm not sure if it's really a breakwater, this long piece or not. I know you showed the nice historical photograph from the Dow buildings in Kuwait book, but also we have in the southern Gulf such things, and I noticed the orientation of it on your plan that you showed where is north, and it acts as a deflector to the northwest direction for the Shamal winds. And the Al Rumaythat, the fishing Bedouin on the Abu Dhabi coast, used to make many of these, and it's for the pearling boats to actually shelter behind them, so it's actually anchorage sites. And again, there's a small obscure paper I published with an Emirati colleague a few years ago, where we called them boat mooring sites, actually. And these segments of walls, they're always angled to the northwest, so that the pearling boats would actually come behind them and tie up together. So if it's stormy weather, so it's a kind of anchorage sites rather than deflecting sites. But thank you.
Thank you. It was my first idea that it's something like a breakwater, like something like a piers. But of course, it's the place like an anchorage. It's not the same construction as from the Kuwait harbors, but the same idea of construction, maybe this way. And but I think that it's not a fish trap. The construction is completely different.
Rob?
Thank you very much. I've got a question for Julie about the church, the new church, the small church. It's very interesting that there's two churches at the site, very close to each other. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us a bit more about the second one, whether there's any material associated with it, or stucco, or whether it's wholly contemporary with the other one, or perhaps earlier or later. I'm just curious about it.
I have one slide, if it's possible, so I will show you.
Please.
So it was excavated by the previous mission, so it's not very published. There is 2 articles with some points and 1 picture, but not more. And so for the material, there is not a lot of things, some shirts, but it's not very clear if it's in place or not. And because I have only the draft books of the previous mission, and there is no stucco, but in the apse here, you have this small cross print in a small banquet. So that's all. And it's a church with a podium in stone, and it's very different from the other one. It's completely different, so maybe this is better. And about the fact we cannot know if one is before the other one, is constructed before. It's a problem of the lack of information from previous mission. So we don't have the stratigraphy, and it seems, for me, nothing could indicate it's not the same period. So Jean-François Salle published the second one, the small one, as earlier, because he imagined it was too close together to be used together. So because the small is small and modest, he think it was the previous and after the big one. But for me, it's not proof. So I'm waiting for the complete publication, and I will maybe do some sounding. But the problem is that they excavated all around, so we don't have the connection now. So.
Apparently it's quite a common feature of European monasteries to have 2 churches aligned like that, actually. It's not uncommon.
Yeah, so it's, it's close, but it's not a problem for me. No.
Nabil? I think we'll make this the last question, if that's okay.
Okay, let me go back to the circle wall in the sea. This could be also possible spring. I've seen this in Bahrain, the ring wall around the spring, and the aquifer dropped down, so that's why you won't see the water anymore. That's possible. And for Julie and the gentleman, for with 2 slides, with less than a second that you did show some of the pottery with both of you.
Okay.
Some pottery with stamp.
Yes.
So you're talking about early period, and you're talking about late Islamic.
No, I show you only for distinguish the 2 settlements that we have found. We have 2 different settlements, not overlaying, and so we
the
found
stamped pottery.
Is the same period. We have is a early Islamic settlement, but is completely different from the Al-Quraniya site. Al-Quraniya is a very late Islamic village,
And in early Islamic period, it's very common, these stamps, and you have some also.
We got them at Cuthmer as well, yeah, many of them, yeah.
And the Italian team who excavated at the beginning, the first one have a lot, and we don't know exactly what for it was. So
It's not been published yet, these stamps?
Some are, but there is no study about it, as I know, and maybe it could be for merchant, you know, it's with jars, or we don't know. And some, I don't know if I show one, but you can have a line, it's aligned on the ceramic, and you can have a few stamps.
Also, the big jar that I have shown you at the end came from the early Islamic settlement.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Just a couple of things now. We're going to reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to carry on. But before we go, hello, translator. You can stop. Please stop. How are you? Are you tired? You're tired? I was just going to say thank you very much because I think it's incredible. You see, everybody appreciates you. You hold us together. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't be able to understand each other. And you've been talking all day, and it's fantastic, very clear translation. So I think there's a big thanks from everybody here. Thank you very much.